Welcome, friends. This is Under the Arch Sports. I'm Eric,
And I'm David.
and today we're going to take a look at the news about Oklahoma and Texas potentially joining the SEC, and then we're going to take a look at how that affects Mizzou. Before we get into that, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, so David, this all started on Wednesday at SEC Media Day, oddly enough, where the Houston Chronicle broke the news that Oklahoma and Texas had inquired to the SEC about potentially joining. And the fun part in all this, David, is that this had been going on for a while. So some people are reporting that there have been talks for up to 6 months.
Right. And I'm interested in how much A&M knew about this, if they knew from the beginning or they're just finding out.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me into one of my points I have about this. What we know is that it was broken on Wednesday by the Houston Chronicle. Hey, David, what SEC school is 50, 60, 70 miles from Houston?
Texas A&M.
Oh yeah, and they hate Texas, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's my little conspiracy on all this is that A&M either had just found out or they found out recently enough that they decided to put that news in their pocket and then let it leak to the nearest newspaper during SEC Media Day. That's my personal theory. What we do know is that A&M vehemently opposed. Initially, there was thought that Mizzou would be opposed. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But David, this move, to me, it is when, not if.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we knew this was going to be coming sooner or later. Now, we didn't know the teams, but we knew eventually once, like, Nebraska, Mizzou, and everybody else reshuffled that a 16-team conference was going to be coming.
Right.
So it was just a matter of when, like you said.
Yeah. Now, to join for a vote for the school to join the SEC, it requires 75% yes vote, meaning there'd have to be 11 schools that voted yes. A&M's going to vote no. Other than that, there historically has kind of been a gentleman's agreement, is the term used, where if the SEC is looking at a school within a state that already has an SEC member, that other member kind of has ultimate veto power. So in this case, with Texas A&M already being in the SEC and the SEC looking at UT, A&M historically would have ultimate veto power, but in this case, Disney money. It's not going to happen. A&M can say no, we veto, and the SEC says, okay, that's nice. You go sit over there. You color your maroon and white picture, and then go play Texas whenever we tell you to.
I mean, at this point, it's a power move by the SEC, especially after the NIL stuff has come out and changed. I think
Yeah,
this is the beginning of what you would call a break off of the NCAA. They're trying to overthrow them, essentially.
yeah, and since this news first broke on Wednesday, there have been unconfirmed reports that the SEC even reached out to schools like Michigan, Ohio State, Clemson, and Florida State. And at that point, you're talking about instead of just the Southeastern Conference, you're talking about the SEC creating some monster league and then rebranding itself as the authority of college sports, essentially a competitor to the NCAA.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and it's also going to be interesting to see the responses of the other three big leagues, and then the Big 12.
Yeah. So I, this is going to happen. I think we're both convinced of that. The hang up is going to be the TV deals. All right. the Big 12, the Big 12 has a contract with the ESPN and Fox that goes through 2025. So the next 4 college football seasons, because football's what we're all paying attention to here. So that's going to be tricky, particularly the Fox part. ESPN, you know, Disney, let's call it Disney, ESPN, Longhorn Network, SEC Network. They're all owned by Disney. So that's just shuffling money around within different departments of the same parent company. That's tedious, but not that hard. But David, 4 years of Fox. That's after this fall. 4 years of Fox. Fox Sports is going to be sitting there saying, "Hey, what are we doing here? We paid for Texas and Oklahoma broadcasting rights."
Well, and I thought I saw somewhere that the buyout right now for each school would be like $76 million or something like that.
Jeez. Yeah, so that's going to be something that has to get figured out. With Oklahoma and Texas leaving, this the concept of the Big 12, it may not be a thing this time next year, but it's almost easier if it. Honestly, I think it's easier if the Big 12 goes away and just completely dissolves and all the schools go to different conferences. But ESPN and Fox, they don't want that to happen because different conferences means more inventory, more games, basically. So they will fight really hard to keep the Big 12 in some form still intact. Whether that is just they can't stick at 8 teams, they're going to have to add more, or maybe a merger with the American or something along those lines. TV's going to want to keep them around, but to the disappointment, I'm sure, of every Mizzou fan everywhere, the Big 12 is going to be at best borderline top 5 or Power 5. Excuse me. I think we're looking at Power 4.
Absolutely. On that note, let's take a look at the impact on the SEC and Mizzou.
Yeah. So the SEC Network had a graphic during Media Day with a proposal for pods. I think most people assume that the SEC will do four pods with 4 teams each. Taking a look at what they proposed. You got Pod A, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina. Pod B is Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, Vandy. C, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and A&M. And then Pod D, Arkansas, Mizzou, Texas, and Oklahoma. Now, David, looking at those pods, what do you see just looking at those?
They're throwing a bone to Texas A&M, number one.
And then separate pod from Texas.
Number 2, honestly, I feel like they're pretty balanced with strength if you look overall. I mean, there's a couple of ways you can shuffle them all, but each pod has 2 really strong teams and 2 teams that could be strong at times. So
yes.
I really don't have a problem with it. The other thing they mentioned is it would move the teams to a 9 conference game season.
Yes.
And they play 2 teams from each pod, and essentially in a matter of 4 years they play everybody in the SEC.
Yeah, for me, looking at these pods, what I see is the rivalries, for the most part, intact. You look at Pod A, Cocktail Party, it's there. Pod B, Iron Bowl, it's there. Also in Pod B, Tennessee getting destroyed by Bama every year, it's there. Pod C, Egg Bowl, it's there. LSU A&M, newer rivalry, developing, it's there. Similarly, Arkansas Mizzou in Pod D, exact same budding, developing rivalry, it's there. Oklahoma Texas Red River rivalry, it's there. Mizzou Oklahoma, call it a rivalry if you want. They played a lot. They're familiar with each other. It's there. Looking at Arkansas with Texas, Southwest Conference days. It's there. And it that might not seem exciting to Mizzou fans going back to playing Oklahoma and Texas, just like back in the old days kind of thing. But it makes an annoying amount of sense for Mizzou fans for this to be the pod setup. And I think it's worth remembering that this is the SEC network's guess. It's not it's not some blowhard journalist out in Chattanooga who's just putting together, something that he thinks might make sense. SEC network very well may have some inside information. So don't be surprised if the final result for pods looks a lot like that.
Now let's bring up one more thing. This whole Mizzou Texas game. When Mizzou was in the Big 12, Texas was the one that kind of blew everything up. Nebraska left, Colorado left. Mizzou was going to stay, and then Oklahoma started following along with Texas, and that's when we decided to bail with A&M. It wasn't pretty at the time, so it's going to be really intriguing to see that matchup again.
Yeah, you remember, Mizzou fans will remember this anyway. In 2013, so February 2013, a year and a half after Mizzou was in the SEC, realignment as far as Mizzou is as far as they're concerned, it's over and done with. Same for the Big 12. But in February 2013, former Texas athletic director DeLoss Dodds decided to pop off the mouth, and he just said, talking about football program, he said, "We're going to have good years again. Our bad years are not that bad. Take a school like Missouri. Our bad years are better than their good years, but we've created a standard." Well, as you can see, since that statement, Mizzou and Texas have both played exactly 100 football games. Mizzou's won 2 more than Texas has. But Eric, it's 58 versus 56. That's almost the same. That's luck of the draw. Whatever. You're Texas. You are supposed to be some high and mighty power. You're supposed to be a blue blood of college football. And since 2013, you are looking up at little old Mizzou.
Well, and let's not forget
that out.
Let's not forget they controlled their conference.
Yeah.
And now they're crawling to the SEC and have to give in to their demands.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing for Texas.
Yeah, I mean, they will never, ever let it get framed that way. But they are doing exactly what Mizzou and A&M did in 2011. It's the same thing. 0 difference. Okay, 1 difference. They're not running away from some bully. They are the bully.
Now, what's your opinion on the impact for Mizzou football, since we're covering the football side of things in general?
Oklahoma, even against an SEC schedule, they're going to win 9, 10, maybe 11 games. So it's not like just moving conferences and all of a sudden they're a pushover. That's a hard game. And that'll be one where I think Mizzou would hope to win 4 out of 10. That might be a stretch, particularly early in the Drinkwitz era. But if Coach Drink keeps recruiting as he does, I think 4 out of 10 against Oklahoma might become realistic. Texas, new coach, so it's interesting to see. We all know that as much as everyone does not like Texas, if they get the right coach and the right players and actually develop them, they will be a top 5 team within 3 or 4 years. But I don't know. I think the days of Mizzou hiding behind a weak SEC East, getting to play Vandy, South Carolina, and Tennessee, Kentucky, and have that be a big chunk of your schedule, those days are gone. This could be real hard for Mizzou. So I think Mizzou's lucky to have Coach Drink.
So I want to counter what you just said there, because I kind of disagree with you. If you look at the SEC East, who are your 2 big teams right now? Florida
and Georgia. Yeah.
And Georgia. essentially, when you go into this pod, you're replacing Florida and Georgia with two really good teams, Texas and Oklahoma.
Fair.
Trade off. Arkansas, I mean, they are what they are. We are what we are. We know that. The difference here, and the one I'm kind of sad to see go, is we've had a kind of a rivalry building with Kentucky, actually.
Yeah.
Both schools' fan bases can't stand each other when we play each other, just because we know the winner of that game is going to be third in the East.
Yeah.
At minimum. That
Right.
seems to be our barometer. So it's going to be sad to lose that game. However, when you're looking at the way they're designing the pod systems, you could have two really bad teams in both conferences that you play that year. It just depends on the scheduling. You could have two really tough years and then two really easy years. I think Mizzou still has that puncher's chance. It just depends on the year, kind of like it does now in the SEC East. Yeah. It just depends. Either way, you still have to beat Oklahoma or Texas, or when you're in the East, you have to beat Florida and Georgia. You still could get lined up with LSU or Bama, but at the same time, you could get lined up with Vanderbilt and Kentucky. You just don't know. It just depends on how the schedule falls. So saying that they're never going to win, I disagree with that. I think they still have a shot. It's just everything has to line up, kind of like it does now.
Yeah, lining up, that's one thing that's going to be a bigger challenge for everybody. This is everyone, not Mizzou, but with the 4 pods, I think a lot of people are expecting that what you'll have is your 12-game schedule, and then the winner of each pod, there'll be like a conference semifinal, and then your conference title game in Atlanta. So you may have to win 2 postseason games to win the SEC. And an SEC champion that wins the college football playoff would end up playing 16 games, which, think about 15 years ago thinking of something like that, which is just crazy. But I do like the fact that if I'm thinking this through on the fly here, but if my understanding of what they're looking at is correct, you will play either home or away every team in the SEC within 2 years. That is a great thing. You'll host everybody in the SEC over a 4-year period. That is wonderful. Because the only teams you're playing every single year are the 3 within your pod. The other 6 are rotating every single year. That's a great thing.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. The vote for the move hasn't even taken place yet, so nothing's official.
No, there's no reason for Mizzou to vote no. There just isn't. You don't like Texas, but everybody doesn't like Texas. That's not a legit reason to vote no.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think it will actually help us out in Texas to play a team in Texas, not only for money, but for recruiting, because that's where we get a lot of our really good players. Because now we can say, hey, we played Texas every year. Your family can go to a game down there instead of traveling up here. It's another recruiting thing. That's what we used when we were in the Big 12 and had that huge Texas pipeline. So I think it's another door opening for Drink to get even deeper into Texas and pulling more players out. Anyway, that's all we have for this video. Thank you for watching Under the Arc Sports. We'll continue to update as things progress, and who knows, we might be talking about 4 super conferences by the time this is all done.
See you guys next time.